Welcome back to Hack City. I'm Joe DeLeone here for our thoughts on week 3 of college football. Yet again, another week where we have absolutely no idea who the top teams are in the country. I'm here to help you figure it out. We're also off to a really hot start. Colin, I think you were in the preloaded chat. Thank you for the very nice donation that you provided with us. I got to say, Colin, it really means a lot that you not only threw a little donation, but you chose to give it when Sean wasn't here. That also makes me feel even better because he doesn't deserve it. I 100% do. Obviously, all jokes. But week 3 of college football, so many unexpected outcomes, like the one that happened with Washington State and Michigan State. What we saw with the Texas A&M Miami game was a little bit expected. Penn State versus Auburn ends up being way more of a blowout than we anticipated. But the first game I want to talk about is the performance that Georgia had versus South Carolina, in which they won 48-7. Now, if you watch that game, that 48-7 score sounds not that explosive, does not sound like they blew them out as much as they did on the field. They kicked the crap out of them, and then by the start of the fourth quarter, they pulled Stetson Bennett. They pulled a bunch of the starters, and they really took their foot off the gas because they were kicking the crap out of South Carolina so bad. I'm going to keep saying this every single week until somebody shows a sign of weakness for Georgia. This Georgia team is almost unstoppable. I kept seeing the tweets. It's not an original one, but so many people have the gag that Georgia is Thanos. Georgia is the program that nobody can touch, and someone needs to rally in some fashion to at least put a chink in the armor to knock them down a little bit. I don't know if that is going to take an injury to an important player. That probably won't even do much because they are so talented across the board that, if they lose a Jalen Carter, they lose a Nolan Smith, that's not going to impact anything for this Georgia program because there's so many talented guys on this roster in every single position. Brock Bowers, holy crap, the kid is an underclassman still. I believe he's a sophomore in terms of eligibility, and he looks like a senior. He looks like a first-round NFL draft pick if he joined this year's class. He would go right next to Michael Mayer as the top 2 tight ends drafted in the 2023 NFL draft. That offense is unexpectedly extremely dominant because we saw times last year when Georgia sputtered a little bit. There were the games that they didn't play their best were because of offensive woes, nothing defensive that they were dealing with. But they're starting to hit that stride. They are starting to ascend to complete and utter dominance on both sides of the football. There's one question about Tennessee I'm going to get to in a second, and I assume it's in relation to Georgia. I have to say this, and I'm not, and I posted like a short on it. I don't want this to happen, and I don't think that this is the right thing to happen. And he's obviously not the best player in the country, athletically, physically, all those things. But we need to start preparing ourselves for if this Georgia team goes undefeated, they win an SEC championship, and they're going to a national championship game, that Stetson Bennett is going to be a Heisman finalist, and he might win the Heisman. I am not saying that he in any universe is a better player than Caleb Williams or more athletic than a J.J. McCarthy. I know that sounds so stupid to say because he was a walk-on, and he's tiny, and he's got a very limited arm. But we need to remember the history of this award. He is playing way better than we expected, and he is on the best team in the country. There is a very, very strong possibility, at the least, he is a finalist because of his connection to Georgia. They're sadly not going to give it to Brock Bowers, who is the reason why this offense is moving. They're sadly not going to give it to Jalen Carter, who is disrupting every offensive line and creating so many massive plays on defense because he's a defensive player. He probably won't even get invited to the ceremony. It sucks and it is weird, but there is, again, a possibility, a very strong possibility. It is trending in that direction that Stetson Bennett is going to be standing at that podium either as one of the finalists or maybe even the guy getting the award. I had a really quick question from Hempley Life. What do you think of Tennessee's chances? So I'm assuming that you're asking, what are their chances of them beating Georgia? I need to see a little bit more action from them. I will say that the Pitt game and the performance that they had at least shows me that they can pull out of a close game, that they have the offensive weapons to win in a shootout. Cedric Tillman had a huge performance. I think it was like 160 yards, something crazy like that in that overtime game. And you also had Hendon Hooker, who has only looked better and better each week. However, that's against like a mid-tier Pitt team that they took to overtime. You can't be like, that's, if you're that comparable in terms of matchup, Georgia is stories ahead of Pitt. And we saw that chain of comparison, which is always something that that we always overanalyze about. And it's easy to overanalyze that. Okay, this team beat this team, but this team also beat this team. So where does that stack up? If we just take a brief look at that, Georgia kicks the crap out of Oregon, who kicks the crap out of the 12th ranked BYU team. Where does that then, like, how much higher up does that place Georgia? And they're, again, significantly better than Pitt. So for them to go to overtime against Pitt is a bit concerning. They might be the one team that, like I was saying earlier, could provide that chink in the armor, could find that one weakness and play them in a close game because they're a hard-fought team. But I don't know if Tennessee is really the team that's going to pull off this upset. Just like thinking off the top of my head, like SEC teams, it's really difficult to project who the hell could be that upset team. It's likely Alabama because of Nick Saban and his ability to beat his former assistants, and we've seen the success that he's had against his former assistants. That's the highest likelihood of anyone that's going to beat him. But it's hard to figure out, again, what that weakness is for Georgia. Last thing on this game, I'm fully out on Spencer Rattler. I tweeted it out. I have never been in on Spencer Rattler, who goes 13 for 25, throws 2 interceptions. The guy's just never had it. The inability for him to play up to the level of his skills has always been so underwhelming for Spencer Rattler, because the guy's got a great arm. He's a great athlete. He can move. The ball pops out of his hand, but the decision making's never there. And I said this when we did his evaluation over the summer, I think he's soft. And I saw a lot of that yesterday. He is rattlesnake. Thanks for disrupting me there, Colin. That distracted the hell out of me. He's soft. I've always said that Spencer Rattler is soft, and he's very, very easily rattled, ironically using that word to describe Spencer Rattler, that he very, very easily gets thrown off when he's pressured, when he's in difficult situations. He has never stepped up and rose up to the occasion where you need your star quarterback, your alleged first-round quarterback, to be. He has never done that. And that's why I don't think he is an NFL draft prospect. He'll be like a day 3 one. He has never been a guy that has been good enough to play up to difficult challenges. We've always seen him fold and take a step back in those situations. BYU versus Oregon, as I've already alluded to, was an eye-opener for us because we thought BYU, a lot of people thought BYU, and I even got text messages about this game that people were saying BYU should I bet on BYU? Should I put my money on BYU? Because I think they were like a 3-point dog on the road against Oregon. And I said, don't touch that game. Absolutely do not touch that game, because it could go one of 2 ways. Oregon wins a close football game, BYU wins a close football game, or out of nowhere, Oregon explodes and kicks the crap out of them because they're juiced up and they're at home and they're facing a ranked team. I texted a couple different people that, and that is exactly what happened in this game. The things that we learned. Jaron Hall cannot do everything for this team. He threw the ball a ton in this game. His final passing total is 29 for 41 and 305 yards. 7 yards per attempt, 7.4 yards per attempt is really good. But they could not move the ball because nobody was having any success running the football. 2.5 yards per carry was that final notch for rushing attempts in this game. That inability to run the ball took BYU out of the game completely. And Oregon's defense gave us a performance that I was not expecting. I'll admittedly was not watching this game as much throughout the entirety of it because I had it on my laptop while I was watching the Penn State Auburn game. This game was boring as hell to watch and to try and pay attention to because it was stop. Jaron Hall maybe picking up a third down and then a punt, and then Oregon running all over BYU's defense that was supposed to be really strong. That defense that we saw against Baylor did not show up in this game at all. I don't know if it's the different climate. I don't know if it was the trip. I have never thought that Oregon Stadium was a tough place to play, but somehow, some way, BYU looks like they're playing a behemoth. Looked like they were playing against Georgia. I will say, and I have to eat my crow here. I have always been willing to admit when I am wrong. I'm not saying that Bo Nix is suddenly a transformed quarterback, but I will give credit when credit is due. Bo Nix had a nice game. Not an elite one, but he had a nice game. He had a quality performance in this game. He ends up finishing 13 for 18, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then he also had 3 rushing touchdowns, 5 total touchdowns in this game. I think that the success for this Oregon team is going to come down to replicating performances like this for Bo Nix. And what I mean specifically by that is not having him to do too much. When you're able to rush for 200 yards as a team and to have, I know 3 of those rushing touchdowns came from Bo Nix, but to have 3 rushing touchdowns and your quarterback only has to throw 18 passes and can complete most of them, that is how Oregon is going to continue to progress and maybe to be one of the teams competing in the Pac-12 championship game. The Pac-12 right now is up in the air, and you need to continue to not force Bo Nix to do everything. Bo Nix has never, ever been a guy who can take over a game. He has always tried to. And we saw the Georgia game is a great example in his career at Auburn that when he tries to take over games, he plays like shit. He has always been a guy who tries to do way too much, runs in circles aimlessly until he can find a home run play. Ask him to do the little things. Let the run game take over. When he's throwing on 2nd and 5, or he's throwing, dump offs in the red zone past the 25-yard line because the run game is taking over, he's not stressed. You don't need him to, like we were just talking about with Rattler, to rise to the occasion. I think that this Oregon team is not as good as properly indicated as they played against Georgia. They are not that good. They are as good as they played in this game. I know that's a little bit wordy. All I mean by that is don't look at the Georgia results. First game for Dan Lanning in his tenure, got hit over the back of the head with a shovel basically as he's trying to get his feet underneath him. This is the game that is going to set the tone for this Oregon program. I have high hopes, and I think once they get Dante Moore, who we did a fantastic breakdown on, go check out that video that Matt Sims broke down and Ryan broke down Dante Moore. Really good analysis on him. Once he comes, this Oregon program could be very, very strong. Maybe they're playing in the Big Ten by then, by the time that he is the starting quarterback. But Oregon right now has that possibility to compete for the Pac-12. It is, as I see it, I don't consider Oregon State to really be in this race. It is a 3-way race right now for the Pac-12 between USC, Oregon, and Utah still. Someone's going to get that second loss, and it's going to might possibly be when one of them plays one another, but it is going to come down to those three teams for the Pac-12. Colin's saying Bo Nix is on the same level. No, but Colin, I push back on that because Spencer Petras is just a horrendous passer, no decision-making skills, is captain dump-off, but he's a horrible athlete, a horrendously terrible athlete for a quarterback. The guy's a statue. He can't move, and that has been the nail in the coffin for him because he can't move. At least Bo Nix can move. At least he can get 3 rushing touchdowns, and he's got a little bit of juice behind him as an athlete. There's a sizable difference. I will say that at times they have been both extremely debilitating for one another's offenses. Bo Nix has been at that level, but I will take Bo Nix in any circumstance. Thanks, Colin, for asking me to talk more about Bo Nix. But I take Bo Nix over Spencer Petras in most circumstances. All right, Penn State, Auburn. Wow, that was possible to get out. Penn State versus Auburn was a game that I was watching very, very closely. Man, Penn State was not effing around. They were playing angry in this game. They were playing with ferocity to prove that they are not just a 2-0 Penn State team that's going to go on to lose later on. This Penn State team has shown us a lot of signs of life. The difficulty of their schedule remains to be seen if they can finish it out when they have to play tougher Big Ten opponents. That Purdue game, I think, set the tone for this season. But most importantly, the performance that they put up defensively and running the football against Auburn is a strong indicator that Penn State could do a little bit of damage in the Big Ten. Not going to win it, but they could do a little bit of damage. I'm starting this now, and I think that some other people were saying it. I am fully in on the Nick Singleton hype train. The plays that man made, actually that kid, he's a freshman. He's a true freshman. That he made in this game are Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley-esque. The guy has the traits, the explosiveness, the highlight play ability to be, by next season, a top 5 running back in college football as a true sophomore. His final stat line ends up being 12 yards a carry, 10 for 124, and 2 touchdowns. He didn't even get that many touches. Like, he was getting rotated with multiple guys. They have so many different running backs that they work in, like Katron Allen, who's the other freshman, who's the other guy who had 2 touchdowns in this game. He didn't even get that many touches, and he still put up 124 yards. And I speak even further to the positivity of Nick Singleton and his capabilities because of the fact that he doesn't need to be overutilized. There tends to be, when you have a talented young freshman like Nick Singleton, who was a top running back recruit, to overuse them, and then they get banged up. They start to have injuries, and by the time they get to the NFL or their final year, they're overused. They've got like 1,000+ carries on them. But he's not being used that much right now. And by the end of the season, he could be used more. They could be saving him for bigger games. He is starting to hit his stride, and his confidence has to be through the roof. That offensive confidence has to be through the roof. And kind of similar to what I was talking about with Bo Nix, very different quarterbacks. Sean Clifford is a guy where if he doesn't have to do too much, he is the perfect man for the job. Keeps the offense ahead of schedule, keeps the ball moving. When they're in third down situations, he can pick up nice chunk yard plays. For some weird, stupid reason, they were using him as a runner. They also used him as a receiver, which was hilarious to watch that they called that play, because Sean Clifford is a pretty mid-tier athlete at best. But his effort and his impact in this game is what you should be asking Sean Clifford to do, which is, when you're not running the football, pick up a 3rd and 5. Get us a chunk play on first down and get us a 15-yard pass. It's kind of weird to see that he had 9.4 yards per attempt because that's just so not Sean Clifford. But overall, that Penn State team is looking a lot better than we anticipated. TJ Finley, though, sucks. I said this going into the game. Real shocker that my prediction comes true in this one, that TJ Finley is not good. He had a lot of nice plays, and that's why there's similar. Again, I don't know why I keep bringing up Bo Nix. People like to talk about the guys that can extend plays with their legs and make crazy highlight plays, and TJ Finley is one of those guys. He's 6'7". He's a massive dude. He is a huge quarterback with a good arm, a strong arm, and he can make those head-scratching plays where it's 3rd and long, 4th and long, whatever, and you think that the play is done, but he rushes up the middle, sees a gap, and picks up a first down. He's that type of a guy. Outside of those plays, though, his accuracy is bad. His decision-making is bad. We saw that with the turnovers that he had. He was getting nailed often by this Penn State pass rush. I really would love to know what the hell is the deal with Zach Calzada. I admittedly do not know that situation, and if anyone else is privy to that situation, I would love to hear why they won't go to Zach Calzada, because neither him or Robbie Ashford are getting the job done. They're just not. At some point, and maybe it's injury, maybe it's stubbornness, I don't know what it is, but you got to put the kid in at some point, because the results of the first 3 games from both Robbie Ashford and TJ Finley are not starting caliber. They are not starting caliber college football quarterbacks. I don't know if Zach Calzada is going to provide any spark for Auburn's offense. He might not do anything. But at the very least, you got to give him a chance. You got to at least try to see what differently can be done if Zach Calzada is in that game and he's the starting quarterback. Again, I have no idea what that situation is. If anyone knows, feel free to comment, but I have no idea why they won't put him in, and it's starting to frustrate the hell out of me seeing TJ Finley make stupid mistake after stupid mistake, and then eventually switching over to Robbie Ashford, who also makes mistakes but gets occasional chunk rushing play. That's not how you produce offense. That's why you only scored 12 points in that game. So Texas A&M Miami ends up playing out as I also predicted and as I anticipated. This was going to be a get-right game for Texas A&M. It was going to be a little bit of a, I don't want to say a 17-9 game as a confidence booster, but it was at least going to provide them with a little, okay, we're back on track. We just lost to a group of 5 school, but we got our mojo back, beating a big brand team, a reputable, recognizable team. We can continue on and move forward. A ranked Miami program. They are not perfect, and they very clearly have their offensive issues still in front of them, and this team is still a mess that they only scored 17 points. But as I said, doing the preview of this show, I believe when I did the preview, I brought up, this was before the Max Johnson announcement of him being the starter, that Haynes King might have started, and then if he started to struggle, Max Johnson was going to come in, and then he was going to finish the game out and do just enough to help them win the game. Instead, Max Johnson is the announced starter. He starts this football game. He goes 10 for 20, which is horrible. Only 140 yards in this game, again, which is horrible. But he at least does enough to keep this offense moving in situations that set them up to score. Not a lot of points. 17 points is an abysmal offensive performance, but he was able to do just slightly a little bit more than Haynes King. I think that Max Johnson, over the next few weeks, will get a little bit more comfortable each week, and his performances are going to improve. Max Johnson has been a guy, and I've said this many times, has always been a guy that is not going to make those highlight plays, but is at the very least just going to hit those 5 to 7 yard passes, keep things moving when you need to. He's a Sean Clifford-esque quarterback that just keeps things ahead of schedule. They need Devon Achane to continue to have big games. And he only rushed for 88 yards in this one, but they need more rushing yards. They need a more built out offensive approach, because we're still seeing a antiquated, outdated offensive game plan for Texas A&M. The one thing that I have to just, round back on, that I have to pat myself on the back on, Tyler Van Dyke sucks. Tyler Van Dyke is not good. And I said this in my preview video that he is the most overhyped quarterback in this year's cycle of awards, NFL draft cycle, all of it. And he played exactly as I anticipated. He was going to throw way too many passing attempts. He was going to do a lot of dump offs, only 5 yards per attempt, which is abysmal. And he has no accuracy. His decision-making is questionable at best. There were a lot of throws that you saw in this game where he was so freaking off target and missing receivers that could have picked up first downs. His touch, his timing are just not good. And I think that he is a big reason why they lost that football game is because he played like crap. Didn't get a lot of help running the football, but he has never been a good quarterback or as good as people thought he is. He has never been a guy who can ascend, take his team to the next level. He's okay. He's mediocre. Not a first-round quarterback. Miami is a couple years away, and they need to find who that next quarterback is, who's going to be the face of the program, because I can sure as hell tell you it is not Tyler Van Dyke. Maybe he's there for a couple more years, which is probably likely because he's not going to come out of this class if he's not a first-round prospect. And I can tell you right now, after a game like that, he sure as hell is not a first-round prospect. So probably in his best interest to stay. The Washington-Michigan State game had to have been the most unexpected one that we got this weekend, because Washington was stomping Michigan State for a lot of this game. And the score is a little closer than I think we anticipated it was going to be. 39-26 for Washington ended up being the final score. And Colin points out the formulated sleep schedule did not work for them. It didn't do anything for them. Did absolutely nothing for them in this game, because frankly, they looked like they were asleep. Jalen Berger, and this shouldn't be a hot take, is not Kenneth Walker. He was bottled up and slowed down very easily. And with a lot of run-heavy teams, it shouldn't be a surprise. And this happened with Kenneth Walker last year. If you slow down the run game and you stop their star or go-to running back, it is not hard to debilitate their entire offense. Peyton Thorne struggled in spots because he was asked to do too much. He was asked to do everything because Berger could not find any rushing lanes. I think he was like 2 yards a carry, which is just terrible. Michigan State's defense specifically, though, looked like they were definitely asleep. They were not ready for the beatdown that Michael Penix put on them. I don't know what it was, and maybe it is the curse of having to play at Indiana. Maybe it is those, the horribleness of Indiana that held back Michael Penix. But man, he looks like a completely different guy, a completely different player. Almost 400 yards passing, goes for 4 touchdowns, didn't really do anything on the ground. But his capabilities as a passer, Michael Penix looks really freaking good. This Washington team deserves to be ranked, and this Washington program, I don't know how much I want to base this game off of how good I think that they can be. But when they have to play the remaining parts of their schedule, and they have to play the remaining teams in the Pac-12, and I said this at the beginning of the show, that it's a 3-way race between USC, Oregon, and Utah. But if Washington plays the way that they just did against a Big Ten team, who Big Ten, by the way, had the worst weekend out of any conference, if they play like that again, they very well could be one of those final teams competing for a Pac-12 championship. They've got some nice players on defense, but Michael Penix, man, rose to the occasion, played really, really freaking well. I do want to give some shout-outs. Anyone who has any comments, feel free to drop them in. First shout-out goes to Syracuse, who played one of the wildest games of the season. Easily one of the craziest. And I spoke too soon yesterday saying that Syracuse-Purdue game was the craziest outcome of the week, was the craziest game of the week. And then we saw that App State Troy game, which ended on the Hail Mary. So it was kind of a jinx in a good favor because it set us up for an even crazier ending to a game. But this game was so seesaw-ish, so back and forth. I will say that Syracuse should be ranked. They deserve to be ranked. Purdue is a better program than their record indicates, but Syracuse, Schrader is okay. Sean Tucker, fantastic running back. Garrett Williams, great defensive back. That secondary is strong across the board. And then on top of that, thank you, Colin, for the donation. We're going to get to that in a second. And then on top of that, Matt Bergeron is a fantastic offensive lineman as well. My other shout out has to go to Kansas, who played really freaking good against Houston. And I put a nice bet on them. Maybe I'll roll over this money that the $2 Colin gave me to place another bet on Kansas. Kansas is way better than I think everyone thought that they were going to be. Out of nowhere, Lance Leopold has always been a really good coach and has put together some really good Buffalo teams. They kicked the crap out of Houston. And I think it's Daniels, their quarterback, really strong player that they've got leading that offense. All right, Colin, for your Notre Dame tiers for the rest of the season. So, by the way, thank you for the donation. I don't know if you were in the beginning, but I also gave you a shout out for the one earlier. Notre Dame is so unbelievably frustrating to watch. And the way that they played yesterday should not, and that victory for Notre Dame should not be something that any Notre Dame fan should feel good about. That should not be, if you're Marcus Freeman, be a rallying point. That should not be something that you're going into the locker room saying, we won a game, like we're going to go to the next weekend. Like this is the first step in us getting our things together. They played like crap. They played horribly against a Cal team that's one of the worst 25 teams in the country. Bottom 25 team. And they almost lost them. They almost let them back into the game multiple times. A game that they should have blown them out sizably. I will admit that a lot of those problems do come down to Drew Pine and how bad of a quarterback he is. I also question the offensive play calling by Tommy Rees. But I said this after the Marshall game. They do not feel like they are being properly prepared and properly coached up on a week-to-week basis. It feels like they come out flat. It feels like that they are coasting through these games. They are not ready to play in any of these games. And that is why I have said that Marcus Freeman's not the guy. I know I got ahead of myself and I said that, you need to fire Marcus Freeman. They're obviously not going to fire Marcus Freeman after 3 games. I obviously know that they weren't going to make that decision immediately after 3 games. But I can tell you now, in 2 seasons, when he is fired, remember that I said this. Remember that we're having this conversation because he has shown that he is not preparing and getting teams ready to play. This is a team that was 11-2 that barely lost anybody, that has 5 top 50 NFL draft picks on it. To be 1-2 and 1-3 in your first 4 games as a head coach, 1-2 this season, is pathetic. It's bad. It's really freaking bad. And that just shows me that you've got the talent on the field, but you have no idea how to prepare them and how to get them ready. The recruiting doesn't mean anything. And I always love to point at that Kevin Sumlin example. Name all the freaking 5 stars that went to Texas A&M. There's too many that chose to play under Kevin Sumlin. And they didn't produce shit for results. And that is what Notre Dame is going to be for the next couple seasons. And they might even freaking lose out on some of the recruits that they've already got committed. I think that they're slowly going to start dipping away. They're going to be scared away. Once one goes, their buddies go. The ones that made the decision to go play at Notre Dame because they wanted to play with their buddies, or a kid that they met on a recruiting trip that they got along really well with. Once those guys choose to go to other programs, they're going to want to go to those other programs too. The bottom is going to fall out at some point. They're going to get embarrassed by USC. They're going to lose a lot of the remaining games on their schedule. That is not a game to rally behind. That is not a game to say, hey, look, we won. This is a positive sign in the right direction. It's not. That is more concerning, and equally as concerning as the loss to Marshall, because they played the same way. Just so happens that they lost the Marshall game because the ball didn't bounce their way in the final. They didn't have enough time to make any sort of a comeback or maintain a lead. And yeah, I agree with this. I think at least Kevin Sumlin proved himself, proved results. We don't know at all what Marcus Freeman can do as a head coach at all, because he's never been a head coach. This is the first time that he has been a head coach. Also, just quickly, this comment that you made, Colin. Yeah, Leopold did do even better as a Wisconsin. I forgot that he was a Wisconsin Whitewater coach. People forget that Wisconsin Whitewater, or don't even know about Wisconsin Whitewater, had some really freaking good players on it, and for a long time was one of the best Division III programs in the country. Goes to Buffalo, and Buffalo had a bunch of guys go to the NFL, developed a lot of guys, and produced some upset quality teams that showed out and came to fight on a weekly basis, and was one of the best teams in the MAC. Like, that was one of the most underrated hirings, that Lance Leopold was hired as the Kansas head coach. Like, I was juiced up that was the pick that they made, and that was who they hired, because he's perfect. He's perfect for that program. That I know that Buffalo's not in the Midwest, but like kind of like similar regionally, where you're in a city or in an area where there's not a whole lot going on. You're not going to recruit people because of the location. It's cold, the weather's not great, and you're just getting kids who want to come play football. Kansas has been one of the most exciting teams, not exciting, but one of the most fun teams to follow. I haven't really watched them, and I watched the end of the Kansas Houston game because I bet on that game. And I have just been like enamored by the performances that they've put up and the strong games that they've strung together. The fact that they beat West Virginia in overtime. And then on top of that, you couple that with an ass whooping against Houston, who was supposed to be a ranked team. Like, that was supposed to be a good ranked Houston team that they kicked the crap out of. I'm trying to get the name of the quarterback that they have. Jalen Daniels. I knew it was really close to Jaden Daniels. Jalen Daniels, man, is like one of those dudes that we're going to be talking about in like a couple of years. Is just like, hey, do you remember Jalen Daniels? Who's just like a random, really good college quarterback. He ran for 130 yards in this game. He almost had he had 5 touchdowns. He almost had as many rushing yards as he did passing yards in this game. Like, he is just a weapon. He's their whole offense. Like, they don't have anybody else who's producing any other results offensively. But he's what's keeping him in games. And I am actually really excited. I'm probably going to talk about this on the preview show, which I know everyone might groan, like trying to listen to me talk about Kansas versus Duke. But Kansas and Duke are undefeated, and they're playing each other next week. It's 11 o'clock kickoff. I don't know if it's my time or if that's the schedule based on Central Time for Kansas, but that's going to be a fun game to watch. Like, those are 2 3-0 programs. I don't know why I'm a dork. I'm a total football nerd that I get excited about mid-tier, big, Power 5 programs that aren't going to do anything at the end of the season facing each other that are just strong football programs. Kansas Duke should be. I forget who they picked. I think it was Tennessee, Florida, who they picked for next week, which sucks. Absolutely sucks that was the one that they picked. And that game's going to be kind of like a slop fest. That's going to be, Tennessee's going to probably pretty easily beat Florida because Florida is just underwhelming in how good that they possibly could have been. Yeah, SEC bias. Are you saying my SEC bias or the ESPN College Game Days SEC bias? I think that's going to be it for me, folks. Thank you for tuning in. For anyone that did hop in for the stream, we will be back with a preview show coming in later in the week, or not earlier, probably trying to get earlier in the week. We're going to do the preview show. I'm trying to get it on Tuesdays, and I think now that I'm not dealing with the complications of trying to move into an office like I was doing last week. And I was sitting at a folding table. We're going to try and do them on Tuesdays, so that gives it a little bit more runtime. But thanks for everyone who did hop in. Colin, as always, much appreciated for the donations and for talking with me this morning. The one thing I do need to figure out, and I love, just talking the talk. I need to figure out when I want to do these recaps, because I tried to do it last night and it was kind of like too late. And I think I want to try and do these Saturday nights, but then part of me wonders like who's actually up and wants to listen to a stream, at midnight on the East Coast. Like, I don't think that many people are going to be into that. Most people are out, they're out at dinner, they're out at a bar. And then the converse of that is trying to do in the morning, then you're competing with the NFL lineup. If you do it on Monday or Sunday night, you're almost a little bit too late to it. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think the Sunday mornings are better. Maybe I just need to wake up earlier instead of doing it at noon y'all's time. Although you might actually be on the West Coast time. Maybe I need to wake up earlier though. Maybe it needs to be like an 8:00 thing, my time. That's the rhythm I'm just trying to figure out, because it's tricky, because there's also going to be some Saturdays where I'm traveling that I'm not going to be able to do the show on a Saturday. So that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. The annoying thing is I think the best performance is going to be on Saturdays though. That's the annoying thing. Maybe I'll do both. Maybe I'll power through and I'll do like a midday show and just talk about the games, and we'll get both up. Colin is West Coast. Okay. All right, folks. Colin, thank you. Anyone else who's tuning in, we'll be back with more content. Appreciate you.